In this video, I decided to test the waters and see just how far I can push my artistic ability by using probably the most iconic yet worst program possible. Microsoft Paint. Everyone has used this app once in their life, whether it was to waste time or sketch something because you're bored, or I don't know, maybe you're at school and wanted something to do on the computer. But could you actually use it in a professional way and have it be used as a professional tool to create and produce good quality manga? Well, the short answer is kind of. Anyways, I ended up actually using it to create an entire one-shot manga. So first I started by trying to get familiar with the program. For starters, I mean, the layout is rather straightforward. You basically have all the tools at the top and then some layers. And so I started drawing the first thing that came to mind for my story, and oh my god, as soon as I put my brush or pen or whatever you want to call it to this screen, the harsh reality set in of just how tough this was going to be. Literally, I shit you not, every 2 or 3 seconds of drawing, the program like completely freezes in place and takes seconds to recalibrate. I quite literally could not draw a complete circle for the life of me because of how badly it was functioning, and I also realized that there was obviously no pressure sensitivity, so I would need to make my art style rather jagged and messier than usual, but you know what, that was fine. That wasn't really the problem here. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but at this point I had to calm down on my perfectionist ways. Anyways, while I painfully draw in the background, let me explain a bit about the story that I'm creating. I wanted to tell a story about a boy doing photography work for some quick cash. He wasn't necessarily happy with his job and was struggling to find purpose in his life. He wasn't the type of person that is necessarily happy to be on Earth, and was literally just doing whatever opportunity came to him to try and find a reason for existence. I know it sounds a bit sad and depressing, but nonetheless, he ends up visiting a museum as a new wonder was just unraveled for the first time in history for the public to witness. So of course, he was being paid to be there and take photos for the greedy journalist that was in charge of him. So after I was done sketching in the first panel, as you see here, I started to get a bit of a feel for the program and got used to the delay. It kind of became normal to deal with the lag at some point, but every time I took a break and came back to drawing, it was like trying to learn how to ride a bike again. I also realized that I would need to add the text bubbles manually during the drawing process since I can't really add anything on the drawing in post-production. Anyways, this was definitely a first for me, and it's going to be a first for you guys too, seeing how this process takes place. The second panel was a shot of his boss yelling and explaining that the readers of the journal would love this, clearly expressing his greed at the moment ahead of them. I began drawing the third and largest panel yet, which was the reveal of the marvel that they're all witnessing. It was the reveal of the world's first superhuman, a seemingly regular girl trapped inside of a fluid tank floating in place. Clearly she was placed there against her own will and was being shown off as a piece of entertainment rather than a human. My reason for writing this story was simple, but I wanted it to be effective. I tend to love writing about human nature and how we act in certain situations. I love to highlight the good and bad in people, and I will do exactly that with this story. Humans love to use anything remotely unique or interesting for their own selfish ways. We as humans and a society have normalized so many of these problems and need to break the foundation of that. So I wanted to use superhuman as a way to replicate the difference between them being unique and the norm. The journalist starts shouting away at the crowds of people surrounding the tank and laughing at the profits he'll make from such a spectacle. There are hundreds of thousands of people at attendance, witnessing this and being a part of the problem. But all it takes is one person to make a difference. The next page begins with me forgetting to hit record, so that's just great, but it's a shot of the main character, Ivan, that we'll call, shockingly looking towards the sight of the girl inside the tank as those around him react in awe and enjoyment. Both parties are showing signs of shock, but in different ways. One is in amazement, whilst the other is in a negative perspective. Negative in the sense that something like this shouldn't be extorted. Ivan decides to take a step closer to the tank after dropping his camera to touch the glass to see how the girl would react. She was rather surprised, almost as if she was begging to be given a way out. Ivan stared back at her and whispered, "This isn't right. A miracle like you shouldn't be on display for our enjoyment." Unsure if she could even hear him, he saw the reaction she had on her face and knew that he needed to help her. After finishing 2 pages with this app, I really started to hate it more and more. I became comfortable with the problems it had, and that scared me. I knew that limiting myself this way was going to be beneficial in the long run, since I will only improve, but it really wasn't just like using pen and paper. It was like drawing with a pen that had ink that would randomly stop working every few seconds with a crumpled piece of paper. No shade at all to Microsoft. Obviously, this program isn't meant to be used in a professional setting, but you know what? Nonetheless, I'm allowed to, say it for what it is. Thankfully, I actually liked how some of these drawings were turning out, and it wasn't because of it being easy to draw, it was because it took literally extra long for each individual section of the panels to make sure I liked how it looked before moving on. I started to become so picky and harsh on myself with such constraints, simply because I knew that I wanted to prove to myself that I can make this work. Once I started the third page, I came to an understanding that things would not turn out perfect. After I had taken such a long break from continuing this work, I decided to, be less harsh on myself and think that it was okay to make mistakes and it didn't need to be perfect. Quite literally a complete opposite feeling than I had when I first started this challenge. The first panel of this page is a shot of the floor with Ivan's camera on it. He dropped the camera in the midst of what he had discovered and needed to do something about it. I drew in some shoes and boots and crowds of silhouettes in the distance to show that it's on the floor of the museum, and then continued moving forward with adding in a text bubble. I wanted to make it a point that some time had passed since he had left the museum, so I wrote inside the text bubble something along the lines of, "A bit of time later, something fell off." Once I finished that section, I started drawing Ivan with his hands in his pockets, approaching towards the thick crowd of bystanders watching the girl trapped inside the tank. Ivan was not the type of person to want to hurt anyone, but he knew that he needed to make it seem that way. He decided to bring a gun to the museum. He stretched it out into the air and fired off the first round into the sky to alert those around him that he was a threat. I actually really loved how these next two panels turn out, so I started to emphasize the grit and intensity of the situation by making my lines more jagged and rough. After the panel of him firing the gun into the air was complete, I wanted this next panel to be a shot of Ivan panicking and screaming for everyone to evacuate now before he needed to hurt anyone. There was one thing I wanted to do in particular for this panel to really stand out and work for what I was going for, and that was his expression. I needed to make him have a mixture of panic and sadness whilst also being nervous for what he was trying to do. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but was trying to convince people that he would. And he was feeling so many different emotions at this moment, and I needed to properly portray them. Anyways, what do you think? Do you guys think that I managed to pull that off? I think I did a pretty good job, but if there's anything I could have changed, feel free to let me know. Once this page was done, I moved on to the most intense moment in the manga. I needed Ivan to make his way closer to the tank while staying in cover, so I placed him behind a pillar with his gun out, waiting for the right moment to make a move. But things started to take a turn for the worse when a police officer made his way into the museum and threatened him to stop what he was doing or there would be consequences. I really liked how the first panel turned out since you could see the tank in the background whilst Ivan is keeping his gun ready. Same with the police officer panel. I think the officer being a silhouette with the megaphone just shows that they have the place on lockdown already, and he was clearly not going to get out of this situation without problems. I decided to make the next panel a very close-up shot of Ivan yelling and pushing his way forward to make his decision. He had a plan in mind the entire time and was finally making it come to life, but he needed to push himself by throwing all stunts out the window and running towards the tank with his gun raised high and his mind going numb. I actually really love this panel, and I think it's one of my favorites in this manga, and I think it looks really gritty and cool despite the difficulty it was trying to use this program. The next panel was a shot of Ivan shooting his gun towards the tank. He had been preparing to try and make her have the option to escape without harming her, so he somewhat carefully shot 2 bullets towards the tank, creating holes in it. The tank's fluid began to pour out all over the floor, and I wanted to show that effect by kind of creating a side view next to the panels of the bullet holes in the tank. I then pulled up a bunch of bullet holes and glass reference photos to make sure what I was drawing made sense, and was actually really proud of how this came out. I think it looks pretty cool. I then decided to make the rest of the scene turn dark. There were 2 shots fired from Ivan, and potentially more from the police, all at the same time. We were left in the dark about what takes place at this moment, and are simply just left with Ivan's thoughts. He explains to the reader that not everyone would understand why he did what he did, and this decision would make him look like a maniac. But to us, at the end of the day, we as readers know why he did what he did, but society sadly would not. Just as Ivan shot the tank twice, proving that glass is fragile and easy to break, the cops had shot Ivan twice as well, showing that humans are fragile and easy to break. Guys, was that cinema? Please someone tell me that was cinema. Anyways, I'm sorry, I thought it was a cool comparison to make and also meaningful because that was what my story was trying to depict. Halio. To depict! Sorry. Glass was preventing the girl from being free from her cage, and Ivan used whatever he had in this world to make a difference. As he bled out from the gunshot wounds, he remained calm, he felt at ease with his decisions, and finally created a purpose for himself in his fragile life. I honestly really love this page. I think it had the most impact and also the most action, and I'll let the drawing process take place for a bit whilst I let you decide if you think what Ivan did was the correct decision or not. The second to last page starts with a panel of Ivan's bloody smile as he chuckles to himself. He doesn't have the strength to move or talk, but he has the ability to do one more thing: distract the police. From an outsider's point of view, they have absolutely no idea what is going on and simply think that a manic man waltzed into the museum to potentially cause harm to those around him. His laughing is just going to solidify that idea and will truly make him seem like an evil person to the police. Ivan knew he wasn't going to get out of this, so why not just dig himself deeper into a hole to at least try and help? The holes began to crackle more and more onto the tank, leaving room for the girl to make her escape. As the fluid continues to seep out the cracks, the police are not paying attention, as they are too focused on the laughing man with a gun in front of them. I then started drawing a panel of a police officer yelling at Ivan, angrily asking what he thinks is so funny, an honestly reasonable crash out. But before the police officer can even finish his sentence, he gets cut off by Ivan laughing his ass off. Once the glass finally cracked and the girl was freed, the silence of laughter made the place go dead quiet. All you could hear was the sound of running liquid as the tank was finally destroyed. The final panel of this page was the girl speaking out loud for the first time in this story. She knew what kind of sacrifice Ivan had made for her, and she also pointed out what she thinks about human life and how it can be both precious and evil all at the same time. Once this page was done, I moved on to the final page of the manga. For this panel, I took inspiration from my favorite sculpture, La Pieta, because I think it's rather beautiful and also wrapped the end of the story really nicely with its posing and deeper connection to the story. I will let this final panel speak for itself while the drawing process takes place in the background. I will say though that the first panel is just words. The girl is talking and explains that she might be the one with power, but she was not a superhuman. Ivan was. Anyways, whilst the final panel is being drawn, I just wanted to take a second to thank everyone that made it this far into the video. If you enjoy content like this, I would really appreciate if you subscribe. If you want to keep up to date with me and other platforms, I have my Twitter and Patreon linked down below in the description. And once this panel is done, I'll show the entire manga on screen all together, but if you want to see the full quality story and read it for yourself at your own pace, it'll be down below on my webtoon, which is also linked in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.